Today is November 22nd. We're in Rome, in Italy, and it's the feast day of St Cecilia, whose church is behind us. And it's we're standing in front of in the piazza, just in the portal. It's raining today here in Rome, but I've talked about St Cecilia now. Here I'd like to tell you how about the conversion of my father here in this church. My father came in 1925 because both his parents had converted to the Catholic faith. They had been Anglican, and he had a brother also, Douglas, and all three of them had converted, but my father didn't want anything to do with becoming a Catholic. My grandfather was a medical doctor, and he came here on pilgrimage in 1925 and urged my father, Malcom, to come as well. And he was finally persuaded. He said, well, I'm not coming to see Christian Rome, he said. I'll come to see pagan Rome. Not because he was pagan, but because he was interested in architecture, in archaeology. And so he came here to St Cecilia's church because it's an archaeological find. And there's something else about this church. You will find a statue of St Cecilia, which was made in 1600 by an unknown sculptor, because when they discovered St Cecilia's body, it was buried under the church, and it was incorrupt. And so they had, in 1600 AD, that's about 1400 years after she was dead, they still could see St Cecilia, and he did the statue of her lying prostrate in the position where she was executed. Well, it was in the basement of this church, which is built over, that was her house, and it was the church is built over that, because no doubt her house was turned into a church, as I mentioned before, because she willed it to the church. And it was only really in 100 years after her death that Constantine allowed churches to be permanently and not persecuted. But this church, this house turned into a church, is where my father went downstairs to see the archaeology. And there, hearing her story, that here she was, a beautiful woman. She had everything the world had to offer her. That is, she had beauty, she had wealth, she had social position, and she had intelligence. She had everything going for her, and she was willing to give it all up for Christ. She was willing to die rather than enjoy all these things that Providence had given her to enjoy, so to speak. But God, and this testimony of her was just, I think, was a grace of St Cecilia that touched his heart so much that he wanted to become Catholic, having said not too long before that he was not interested in becoming Catholic, and he'd come to Rome not to see Christian Rome but to see pagan Rome. And so I find it interesting, there's a certain parallel that Malcom had one brother, Douglas, and Douglas had converted to the Catholic faith before he had, and Cecilia converted two brothers. I think they only were two brothers, and it was through the grace of the conversion of one that the other one converted, and after she converted Valerian, then Valerian was so enthusiastic that he converted his brother Tiberius. In this case, I believe that Douglas offered his life for his brother's conversion, and Cecilia was the one appointed in heaven to do that. And so my father had he had great ability in archaeology. We never really talked about it a whole lot when I was growing up, but he had won scholarships for this, and even some of the famous archaeologists at the time would either consult him or ask him to be working with them. So it was his great love of archaeology was what brought him to the church here in St Cecilia here in Rome, and it was here that where she was martyred, and that he was converted at the place of her martyrdom. Actually, I think down in the basement of the church after hearing her story of her life. And I remember asking my brother Peter, who has gone to his reward as well, and I both asked my father, after 40 years after his conversion, maybe more like 45, and he said, well, why did he convert? And actually it was 1980 thereabouts, and he said it's because of her example. But we knew it was St Cecilia, but we didn't know why. But it was having heard her example was what touched his heart, and he could see that if she could give up everything for becoming Catholic, then it wasn't that much for him to do the same, and he became a Catholic as a result. And that's a grace that St Cecilia obtained for him by her life. So the testimony of the saints lives on today, even though she lived almost 1,800 years ago, or was martyred about 1,800 years ago, almost to the year. I think we're It was around 210 that she was martyred, as I recall. Now it's strange that they tell us that, there's some people say, well, we don't have any documentary evidence that St Cecilia existed. Some of these foolish so-called scholars. Well, I'm reminded of, if you want documentary evidence, just go inside St Cecilia's church, and there she is. She's buried, reburied, but she was exhumed in 1600, and there she is, incorrupt. I mean, if someone says, John, you don't have your passport, you have no documentary evidence that you exist, so I don't know who I'm talking to when I talk to you. Well, it's the same stupid thing. I mean, obviously, a living body is, that's documentary evidence enough. Well, here in this case, it's an incorrupt body of 1800 years, still to this day. And you can see that beautiful statue of her sculpted by an unknown artist, but he's gone all over the world. I have a sample, I have a copy of it on my altar at home. So God bless, and pray to St Cecilia. She's a great saint, and she's in the Mariology of the faithful of the church, and in the canon of the Mass for the last 1800 years. Thank you.